Hello, everyone, and welcome to the October 2nd edition of Sports Peak. Obviously, here today as both Zoe Alter and Rahill Jaiswal here along with me. No Eddie being here, them being our special guests. We're actually recording on a Thursday, the first day of October, Halloween season, right around the corner. But I'll tell you what, it is a beautiful time in sports right now. Since COVID, we finally crowned our first official champion in the NHL side, and that is the Tampa Bay Lightning. And there's still many more champions to be crowned in sports. Baseball right now, they sit in their playoffs. The NFL season just started, and we're through 3 weeks as a Giants fan, 3 weeks of suffering. However, an aspect that there's a lot of upside to see what happens throughout the rest of the year. And on the NBA side, the Lakers and the Miami Heat, who expected them to make the NBA Finals just 3 months ago, now they sit there with a chance to take an NBA championship this season, and it's going to be exciting. But first, we're going to start off here today with the NFL. And I know, Zoe, you being a big Lions fan,
oh yeah,
not so happy with the start before we talk about everything. How do you feel about Matt Patricia? Last time you were here, you were optimistic. How about now?
it's always cautiously optimistic. It's never really optimistic. You know, sometimes you get a little too hyped up. Matt Patricia, I believe in him sometimes and I don't believe him in others. I think it comes down to more of your players and your coaching decisions, I guess. So some of the decisions he's made, some of the plays he's run have been a little questionable, but it's just about everything coming together. So you have a bunch of big injuries going into the season. So the first 2 games you don't have Galladay. That was pretty much the biggest thing because that's the target for Stafford, that Galladay can have 3 guys on him and Stafford will throw the ball up and Galladay will somehow get it. And he ends up forcing it to him, but it works. But then Stafford tries to do that with other receivers and it doesn't work. And we saw that a couple times in the first 2 weeks where there were really close to turnovers and just situations that shouldn't have happened because he was trying to throw to someone who wasn't Galladay, who he was trying to make into Galladay. So this week, Galladay came back. Obviously it went well. They ended up winning. So I think that was a really big piece of it. The defense is a really big piece of it. Not fully sure what's going on there. We're missing a couple aspects. First week, we didn't have Jeff Okudah. He came back. He's been getting burned by everyone. I don't know. You guys don't watch Lions, like I do, but he, just people running right through him. He has not been able to cover routes. But also, he didn't get a preseason. So there's both sides of that. I think it's the team adjusting to each other. Do I say playoffs? No, but I love watching good football. So if I get to see them score a couple touchdowns and celebrate, I'll be happy.
How are you feeling about Adrian Peterson to this point? Because to me, he's looked pretty solid. I didn't expect him to be running for about 80 yards a game, it seems, to open up this year.
It was a little weird when they first signed him. I remember when they signed him, and I told my dad, because he's the person that I always talk Lions with, and I was like, the Lions just signed AP. And he was like, you're lying. He was like, that must be like, he was like, it's fake. Like, are you sure? Like, check your sources. And I was like, no, I'm pretty sure they just signed him because they had just drafted Swift at that point. They had Carry On. It was a little confusing. But I actually really liked the signing. At first, as soon as he did it, I was happy because I don't think, as you just said, no one expected him to get the usage he's getting. But I think he's a really good person for Swift and especially Carry On because I think Carry On's kind of the same runner to look up to. I think that's really important. And last week, Carry On wasn't as much involved in the running, but he was a huge blocker. So the offensive coordinator actually after the game came out and said, if I had to name an MVP of the Cardinals game, I would say it was Carry On because his blocking was so good. And I didn't realize that because, I don't look for blocking. I look for the guys making big plays. So AP's been getting the running and the touches, but I think it's because everyone else has been doing their assignments, if that makes any sense.
And by the way, there was another running back signing, and now this is where I'll turn to you, Rahill, you being a Giants fan just like I, sharing the common suffering. How did you feel about Devonta Freeman last week making his debut against the 49ers?
Well, I like the signing move because realistically you need someone or at least something to try and make up for the loss of Saquon. But again, I think he got 5 touches because they fell so far behind to the San Francisco 49ers. You can't run the football that well when you're down by that much. But I do like the move. I know. It's a running back we need. He had a lot of great seasons in Atlanta, a lot of Pro Bowl seasons. Very for his size, pretty strong, pretty physical runner. So I like the move of signing him, but. He's not going to give you anywhere. None of those guys combined are going to give you anywhere the production of Saquon Barkley because Saquon Barkley have first game, I think he only had 15 rushing yards, but he caught somewhere for around 60, 65 receiving yards. He's great in the open field. We all know how good he is, but let's just say, Tim, I'm not looking forward to this week versus the Rams because I think the Rams will probably put a 45 on him. But the Devonta Freeman move, I like it in that aspect, but again, it's not going to make up for the loss of Saquon.
Well, one thing I think about when us facing the Rams, obviously statistic-wise, we've done very good against them over the years, but this is a much different team. Eli Manning isn't the quarterback for the Giants. And also back then when the Giants faced them, they obviously weren't the greatest show on turf, but they were a team that was mediocre, coached by Jeff Fisher. But, when I look at this team through the first 3 weeks, I start to cry a little bit because I just can't figure it out. Game 1, defense was spotless against Pittsburgh. Played an incredible game. Leonard Williams, he already has 2 sacks on the year, more than he's had in the past 2 years combined, and he's looked pretty well to start, as well as the pass rush. Then week 2, the defense again had a little bit of a struggling first half, played very well in the second half. And then last week, terrible. Couldn't get off the field in third downs. The secondary, we knew that was going to be a disaster to begin with, but the secondary was awful. The worst thing I've ever seen. And Jets fans are complaining about their team overall being injured and offense being terrible. Well, let me tell you something. Daniel Jones has 2 touchdowns and I think 4 interceptions, if I'm not mistaken, already to open up this year through week number 3. And it's like that offense can't find a single thing. Don't get me wrong. Saquon Barkley isn't always going to be the answer. Daniel Jones needs to, A, hold on to a football, but B, make big passes when they matter. That's the difference from a good quarterback and an average quarterback. And that's why quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes have shined early in their careers, because they know how to protect the football to an extent. Daniel Jones, he hasn't been able to do that, and that really does concern me, Rahill.
You talk about it. That drive against Pittsburgh, it was a 19-play drive. It looked like they had momentum. They score there. It's, I think, what is it then? It becomes 17-16 at one point or something. And instead of checking it down to Saquon when Saquon's wide open for a 3-4 yard gain in the flat, he tries to throw it in the end zone. Next thing you know, he gets hit while he throws. It's a duck, and it's picked off. And all of a sudden, that drive fails, and pretty much their whole momentum for the rest of the game gets shattered. You talked about the late interception against San Francisco at the end of the first half. I know we all were like, just do not force it in there, and that's exactly what he does. Luckily, he only gave a field goal, but I love him as a quarterback, but he's got to learn. I thought last year was a bit of a wake-up call for him, the amount of times he fumbled it away, but he's got to learn at some point that you got to take care of the football. That's really what it comes down to, and if he doesn't take care of the football, they're going to continue to lose games. So.
Well, I'm going to ask one more question before we go into our football, I guess you could say review through 3 weeks, but who would you rather have a quarterback at this point, Daniel Jones or Eli Manning? Giants fans cried, but at least Eli Manning can protect the football in the game for the most part. I know he's retired, he's done, but I kind of miss Eli a little bit right now.
I don't know. That's a Eli. You saw the struggles he had without the offense, but at least Daniel Jones has legs and can run the ball somewhat. I think he was our leading rusher. He was the leading rusher last week, but Eli was there was times where Eli could be a little suspect with the ball. That season before they won the Super Bowl, he threw a league high, I think 26 interceptions. But they always found a way to win. But I don't know if you can compare the teams now because the defense was far better back then. But they found a way to stay in games and win. And I think that's what they need to do. They need to find a way to stay in. They stayed in well in the first quarter because they only gave up 2-3 field goals. But that's realistically what you have to do. Just try and stay in the game, put pressure on the other team, and hopefully they make a mistake.
Yeah, and one thing that's been very different from last season that I love about Joe Judge in particular is that he's found ways to take accountability and give people opportunities to prove that they're going to be on the field and not just handing out spots based upon the depth chart. But now I do want to take a look into what we've seen now through 3 weeks in the NFL, not just by our favorite teams, but overall. And I'll start with you, Zoe. Who do you feel maybe has been the biggest surprise team-wise through these first 3 weeks?
In a good way or a bad way?
Well, in a good way. We'll go to the bad way next.
In a good way? All right. Let me think. There are a couple who I knew were going to be good and then have proved it. So, like the Seahawks and people that, were on the fence but then proved that they were good. One team, I guess, that I'll talk about that I don't think is good but is somehow 3-0, the Bears. I don't know if you guys have gotten it in your head or not, but I'm just like stuttering. I have no thoughts in my head about how they're 3-0. It makes no sense to me.
They should be 0-3. They should be 0-3. They really should be.
Even without that Lions game, like that's a whole thing. But Mitchell Trubisky at quarterback playing the way he's been playing, Khalil Mack not playing like the Khalil Mack we're all used to seeing, and the whole team just being dysfunctional in itself. I don't get how they've been good, so I guess that's kind of been a surprise, but I don't know if it's a good surprise or not.
Well, and who knows about Nick Foles, how he's going to play. I mean, it's a flip of a coin when he becomes a starting quarterback, but then yet again, he's expected to save this team. And Mitchell Trubisky, it's like he can only play one half of football. I mean, literally. He turned up second half against the Giants, obviously against the Lions, and, I still feel the Lions should have won that game, but at the end of the day, you got to play 4 quarters of football. I think it is a surprise that they are 3-0, but I don't see the success lasting. I mean, look at the teams in that North. That North, and you said it when we first talked about in the preseason, Zoe, that North is the division to watch. Those are 4 excellent football teams all together in one division this year. How about you, Rahill?
Well, just to make Bears fans cry, you drafted Trubisky ahead of Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. So there's that. But biggest surprise, I wouldn't say this is my huge surprise because I thought they were going to be good, but I've been surprised. I've been pleased with the New England Patriots. I know they're 2-1 and they haven't beaten the best teams, but they hung in there with Seattle. And you think about it, they realistically could have beaten Seattle on the last play in the goal line. So that was a great measuring stick for them. So they could be sitting at 3-0 right now, and it's going to be interesting, especially considering how the Buffalo Bills almost imploded last week versus the Rams. Got maybe a little lucky with the pass interference call. So I don't at the beginning of the season, I said, the Bills, that division for them was close to a lock, but I don't think it's any sort of lock right now because I think New England at this rate could probably win the division.
Well, it's funny. You mentioned the Patriots. I'm going to mention their opponents that you also just briefly mentioned, and that's the Seattle Seahawks. And I'll tell you what, Russell Wilson has been impressive, arguably the best quarterback through the first 3 weeks. His arm has been a cannon. And overall, with the Seahawks, this is probably the worst defense they've had in years. In fact, they're dead last in the league right now in passing defense. And
what they give up, like 31 points to the Cowboys the other day? That was insane.
Yep, and of course, Shaq Griffin, he's allowed, not Shaquem. Obviously, we know he's not with them anymore, but Shaq Griffin overall has allowed a lot of touchdowns of late, it seems. He had his first interception, I think, 3 seasons, which really surprises me because he was a Pro Bowler last season. So that's a thing to think about. But this has been arguably the worst defense they've had in years. And the fact that Russell Wilson's found a way to make plays every time he's on the field, they haven't really turned it over. Now, I know the Chris Carson thing is somewhat worrisome, but let's be honest, there's a new running back behind Russell Wilson, it seems like, about 3 times a season anyways. So they'll find someone that fills that hole just like Carson and will find success. But this is a team, again, in the NFC West, rather, that also has looked good. I mean, Arizona Cardinals, I picked them last week. Shouldn't have because they lost, but they look pretty promising to open up the year. Obviously, the 49ers, if you get Jimmy G back, I think you're still a contender, but the question is how healthy you can be. But, I mean, other than that, I still don't really know what to think about the Rams. They've looked good, but it's not better than the NFC North, in my opinion. And I think Seattle is going to be a dominant offense to watch for the rest of the year. Russell Wilson, a favorite already to win MVP, in my opinion. But now I want to go to the upsetting side, and I'll start with you, Zoe, again on this. What's been the biggest upset to you team-wise? Because there's been a lot of teams with expectations this season, and there's a good bunch, I would say, that really haven't lived up to the hype to this point.
I wish I didn't say the Bears for the last one because I hate that I keep going back to NFC North teams, but I knew we were going to talk about this before when I asked you good or bad because I was thinking Vikings the whole way.
100%.
That was a huge surprise to me in itself. I knew that they had lost some pieces, but I didn't expect them to do whatever's been going on with them lately. I definitely didn't expect that. That was kind of out of nowhere. I've never believed in Kirk Cousins, I think, ever, but just the way – I know they got rid of Diggs, but I still expected them to put some sort of team together, and they just haven't at all. And that was probably the biggest surprise in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, what is it, 6 interceptions for Kirk Cousins already? I may be wrong, but it may be 5 actually, but it's terrible.
He will be this weekend. So.
He has Winstonitis. He literally has Winstonitis. I mean, he's throwing for 300 yards a game, but it's like if you keep on turning over the football, you're the opposite team's best friend. And I have to agree. I mean, they've been upsetting. This is a team that I still feel is very good. But obviously, yes, don't get me wrong, you lose Diggs. He's not the team at the end of the day. And
No,
they've been
Thielen, I
very,
think,
very
is more of the
underwhelming.
team. For me, sorry, I think Thielen is a bigger aspect of the team than Diggs is. So that's why if they'd lost Thielen, I would have said it would have been a bigger deal. But Thielen's their consistent guy. What did he have, like 9 games last year with 100+ yards? Remember that whole stretch during fantasy? I remember everyone was freaking out over that. Like, I just don't understand what's been going on. It's like their offense crumbled, as you were saying. Like, it's a Winston thing. It really is.
It's very, very similar. How about you, Rahill?
I'd probably agree with Minnesota. Their defense has also been extremely poor. Like you said, they lost Diggs, but Diggs is not realistically. Diggs is not the whole team. You still have a great running back in Dalvin Cook. I do think Kirk Cousins is not. I never believed in either, but I at least expected better from Minnesota, considering that they competed somewhat with Green Bay. I think they went 10-6 last year, won that playoff game in New Orleans. So there was upside again to this season. The fact to see them 0-3 at this point. Another team, just given their past results this season, I'd say the Falcons, because the Falcons could be sitting at 2-1 right now. Instead, they sit at 0-3 because of blowing the leads. But that's just classic Atlanta. But I'd also say Minnesota's probably the most disappointing team.
Yeah, you want to talk about how many times you can blow a lead. I mean, I think the Falcons can literally write a book at this point with how many times they've blown big leads. Not even little leads, but just simply big leads, and have ultimately played one half of football and have fallen apart. And I do have to agree in that response. They've been a big upset, especially after a tough season last year. They've turned around, and it's almost like they haven't really improved overall, which is upsetting. But, had I not, by the way, talked about the Giants earlier when we were talking about our favorite teams, I would have said the NFC East as a whole is an embarrassment this season.
Well,
but I'm going to go to the NFC South and the New Orleans Saints. The Saints sit at 1-2. Everyone expected this year to be the battle between Breeze and Brady. And unfortunately, it hasn't been that way. Now, don't get me wrong. They have one win, and it came against the Buccaneers, beating Brady. But since then, they've looked terrible. The defense hasn't really played well, and the offense has been very, very slow. I mean, they've had some big plays with Drew under center, but it's like Drew Brees' arm just hasn't been consistent. Sean Payton needs to really figure out what he wants to do with this offense, because until that offense gets going, they're not going to be able to win games. And to me, it seems like the Saints maybe onto a bad season for the first time in a while. I mean, I don't remember the last time they had a worse record than 7-9 in the season. And that's going back a long while ago, maybe 10 years now we're talking. And I know they were irrelevant for a little bit since that Super Bowl, but it's feeling like that way to open up this year.
I know the Kamara thing, right? So I get the Kamara, but I've definitely seen flashes of Kamara. The Kamara we know, just little short gains. Also, when they get Michael Thomas back, I think they go right back up. But
that's the problem, though, is that just Michael Thomas is his main guy, and he has no one else to throw to. I mean, literally, don't get me wrong, it's not that they don't have receivers, but when you throw to a guy 100 times a year, it's like almost like the Eli Manning-Odell situation, where you look at it and it's like, well, he can't throw to anyone else because he's so used to throwing to one person. Not that that's an aspect, but he's so used to trusting one guy to get separation on a slant or getting open that he now has to force himself to learn other receivers that are a little bit less reliable, which means that he's going to be spending a lot more time in the pocket. He's going to be spending a lot more time holding on to the football. And it's something Breeze needs to adapt to, because he's been fortunate to have Michael Thomas not miss a single game since he's come in the NFL. And what is that now, 3-4 seasons maybe since Thomas has been in the NFL? So Breeze is going to have to do a little bit of learning, but if they don't keep it up, I just don't think it's going to happen.
I mean, I will say I'm not super worried. I mean, people talking about Breeze's arm strength has been done. Let's be honest, he hasn't had the biggest arm ever since he's entered the NFL. He's more of a pinpoint accuracy guy. He's not the guy that's going to bomb the ball 35, 40 yards down the field. We all knew that. Now, I will say, with the whole, it's going to take obviously adjusting. without Michael Thomas. He threw to him 100 times last year. I will say, though, Emmanuel Sanders is still there. And I know he hasn't gotten going. That's because they didn't have the preseason, so less of training camp, so less time to get him, used to the offense. But I think as the season goes on without Michael Thomas, watch for Emmanuel Sanders. Drew Brees will probably be targeting him more. Kamara, we obviously saw what he did. He almost had 200 yards from scrimmage against Green Bay. And they were in that game versus the Packers until Taysom Hill just fumbled the ball. So I wouldn't say it's time to panic on New Orleans just yet. They always have some sort of a weird rocky start. I remember, what was it, 2 years ago, Fitzmagic lit them up for 45 at the Superdome last year. Dan Quinn and the Falcons held them to about 10, 13 points. So they have games here and there, but I wouldn't worry about them just yet.
And if I'm not mistaken, too, the Saints defense is down there in terms of the passing defense, just like Seattle. And when you look at that compared to last season, it's a little bit scary, in my opinion, only because of the fact that this is a team that, again, had pretty solid expectations. Might I remind you, a defense that carried Teddy Bridgewater through that span last season during the Drew Brees injuries. But I do want to transition now over to the MLB side. And we've now seen, for the most part, the first round here in the wild card round. And it's been pretty good. I know, again, Rahill, you being a Yankees fan, just like I am, very ecstatic, a 2-0 sweep. A night that we stayed up until 1:30 a.m. just to see them blow a couple of leads and then come back and win it. But this playoffs overall to start has been very, very exciting. We're only waiting, I believe, on one more series now to conclude on the AL side. Meanwhile, the NL side is on their game twos as we speak. What are we expecting, I guess, first from the final AL results? We know the Yankees are going to face the Rays. And, we don't know what's going to happen in the White Sox series, but the Houston Astros knocking off the Twins. What do we expect on this White Sox outcome, Rahill?
Well, I believe as we are speaking right now, I think the White Sox are up 3-2, I believe. I'm not sure. I picked them to win the series. Oh, excuse me. No, it's 3-3 now.
It's tied 3-3, yep.
So it's tied 3-3. I can go. I still like the White Sox. I picked them at the start of the series, but I want to talk about the Astros. I don't know if any of you guys heard what Carlos Correa had to say. He said after they won, he was basically talking about how essentially he was like, oh, no one wants us to be here, but now what are they going to say? How are they going to prove us wrong? And I got an answer for you, okay? You are a clown, Carlos Correa, okay? I was thinking about bringing my trash can here. You know what? Here, let's use it as a trash can. Let's give you props. You beat the Minnesota Twins, who've lost 18 straight playoff games in a 2-0 sweep, okay? Let's crown you king. Anyway.
Well, you want to know the scary part about this is that the odds are, let's say the A's win today over the White Sox, they're going to play another team that chokes in elimination games. And, okay, I guess they'll escape this one being the Oakland Athletics. But then you face the other choke job of a franchise. And what? You may escape them too. And then surprise, surprise, an ALCS between the New York Yankees and the Houston Astros. Who would have expected that one? If you think about it, I just don't know. I really don't know what to think in that regard for the Houston Astros. I think Carlos Correa is out of line for saying what he said because, let's be honest, him saying that makes fans not want them to be there more. They should have had suspensions. It was a joke. It was an absolute joke. The fact that Joe Kelly had to take a longer suspension than any Houston Astros player is absolutely insane. And that's really the scary part of it, is the fact that there was no accountability taken. Firing managers doesn't happen because it's going to happen eventually. You could be a successful manager, for example, Joe Girardi, and still get fired from your job. That doesn't do anything. A $100,000 fine or a $5 million fine doesn't mean anything for these GMs. But at the end of the day, it comes down to what the right thing is, and MLB didn't do the right thing, and fans are still angry about it, but there's nothing they can do at this point other than let Houston continue to do what they're going to do. But Zoe, I'm going to ask you, because you were on the opposite side of the spectrum. If I'm not mistaken, you are a Twins fan.
I'm a Mets fan.
Mets fan.
I'm that fan. I'm sorry.
You're good. You're good. We announced that one Twins game together. I got you.
So, how are you? Obviously, the Mets didn't make the playoffs. How are you feeling, though, in regards, because this is the first time we've been able to actually talk about Steve Cohen. How are you feeling about the future of the Mets?
Honestly, at the moment, not so great. If you had asked me before the season started, I would have been a lot happier with it. Luis Rojas, I know we've not had him for that long, but his time has got to be up. I don't know what went on this season, but that was more than enough that I saw a little too much from him. Him not standing up for his players when certain calls happened. That's something you want from your manager. You want to see that fire out of them. And I just didn't see that fire out of him in a lot of games. And I think as a fan, that was one of the most upsetting things for me. You can make a bad decision. That's fine. You're a rookie manager. I don't expect you to be perfect or look like a veteran manager, but I expect you to stand up and care for your players. And I didn't see that out of him as much as I would have liked to. So I think that was it. I have never been more excited for Steve Cohen to come in. I've been asking for this for years, please just get rid of the Wilpons and I'll be the happiest girl on earth. And that's finally happening. And I think that in itself has given me more than enough happiness that I need right now. But we'll face the issues next season. I think you let Steve Cohen come in, see what he can do. I know he's actually willing to spend money on this team, unlike the Wilpons are. So that'll be interesting to see who he brings in, I think.
What do you think is the biggest must acquisition the Mets have to make here during this offseason?
I think you need to find a catcher. That's one of the main things. So I think Cabrera could be a really good guy to go for. I know Asdrubal Cabrera, they used to have him. I think he's been really good if you could target him again. Wilson Ramos, I really like him, but I don't think he's doing the job there. And you can't just stick Tomas Nido behind there and call it a day. So.
Yeah, I think, though, to an extent, you want Francisco Lindor. To an extent, I think that would be huge because it helps out the team a little bit. And I think that Steve Cohen wants to make a splash getting big players. I mean, hey, he could try to, maybe go out and get Trevor Bauer. I mean, who knows what happens with Marcus Stroman.
I think if you make a big splash, you got to go for a pitcher. I think the Mets, if we've seen anything from them this year, they brought so many guys up from the minors and from their farm system they kept with them. And they got them into games a lot, too. So I think, if anything, they're pretty confident in their position players. They've been switching them all around. Jimenez, I know, has been a huge bright spot for them. That's also why I think you don't need Lindor as much, but a pitcher definitely necessary. DeGrom's not going to win the Cy Young this year, which is it's a little odd. But it's weird to not have, DeGrom as your Cy Young winner. But I think it's going to help when you get Syndergaard back, but the pitching scenario is definitely an issue. The fact that Lugo had to become a starter this year was terrifying, and your bullpen still sucks. So you got to go for pitchers,
Indeed, but I will say this, Seth Lugo's done a good job, but now I want to focus it onto the playoff aspect for you. What's been your reaction in these first couple weeks, or I shouldn't say first couple weeks, but these last few days of the MLB playoffs? Because obviously, like Rahill and I mentioned prior, it's been exciting, obviously, as a Yankees fan, to see, a bunch of close games. But from your perspective, not having a team to support, let's say, in the playoffs, it's got to be more of a, I guess you could say, interesting view.
Well, you guys know me well enough to know that my favorite thing in the world is finding something to mock someone about. So I love mocking my friends who are Yankees fans. It's probably in my top 5 activities that I ever do. So when I found out, Shane Bieber, they're going to have to go against him, I was like, let's go. I had a dance party. I was like, this is going to be great. The Yankees are going to get shut down. I'm so beyond excited for this. Let's go, Luke Voigt. You're finally not going to hit a home run. I was so excited. And then that happened, and I was like, oh, great. I had my whole scheme set up. I was so ready to trash all my friends. And then that happened. So I guess their New York team, happy for the Yankees, but I was more excited to trash people, and I didn't get to do that. So I'd say disappointed.
Well, disappointed, I guess you could say, on the aspect of the Yankees. But how about the other series? I mean, we've seen, a bunch of good games overall. And it seems like, for the most part, with the exception of the first Yankees clobbering, every game, for the most part, through the NL wildcard and AL wildcard have been pretty close, and have, especially that Reds-Braves game, have made fans really want to tune in and watch.
Yeah, I mean, I know, staying on the AL side just for a half a second, a team that I really was excited about and I've been excited about all season was the Blue Jays. I know they've been so up and down, but I was so high on the Blue Jays. I'm a huge Vlad Guerrero fan. He's one of my favorite players in the league. I just think he's one of the guys when someone gets up to bat and you sit down on the couch, when you walk through the room, you're like, what's on? You're like, oh, Vlad's up. And you sit down, you're like, I want to watch his at bat. He has, when I walk into a room, that's what I see from him. And that's what I got from this whole Blue Jays team a lot. When they picked up Jonathan VR, I was so excited for that one. I was like, let's go. I think their potential was a lot higher. I know the Rays outplayed them, obviously, but I think I expected more from that, but I really enjoyed watching that series.
Well, and that's where I agree. This is a team that has to learn and develop. And there's, in fact, a bunch of teams on the AL side that need to develop. The Blue Jays being one, we know they have a bright future. The Chicago White Sox, they're another one that's in their first playoff series as a group together. And while, yes, for example, you had Dallas Keuchel, who has that experience, as a team, they still need to learn how to win playoff baseball. And I mean, how about the San Diego Padres? This is their first time as a group in the playoffs. And even a mix, the Reds, they have to learn. The Marlins. I mean, who expected the Marlins to make the playoffs and have a 1-0 series lead against the Chicago Cubs to this point?
Jorge Alfaro has been the biggest blessing the Marlins have ever seen in their life. My lights are flickering because of him. He just brings such a presence.
I believe her lights may have gone out as we've had a freeze. At first, I thought that was just me.
Nope,
but maybe not.
Well, dude.
So, going back, I guess, on the Marlins topic, and I'll have you answer this, Rahill. What surprised you most upon the series, despite the fact that the game was canceled today?
The which one?
The Marlins Cubs.
Oh yeah, that's right. I don't know what the whole situation is. I don't know. Apparently, there was rain in the forecast the whole day, so I don't think they were going to find a window to play against, play with. So, and Zoe's been kicked out of the meeting. But I don't know if it's that, or I don't know if it's a positive COVID test. But hopefully, it's just rain. Hopefully, they can get this series back on track. But yeah, the Marlins have been a great story, especially after, remember at the beginning of the season, there was 14 positive tests in their club with staff members and players. And, a lot of people thought, if the MLB doesn't do something about this, the season could be maybe wiped away. But the fact that they were able to kind of, handle that rocky patch and get to the playoffs. And also now they have a 1-0 lead on the Cubs, like you said. It's been great. But as far as the game going canceled, I guess it's surprising in that aspect. But if it's rain, then we've seen it before this season, so I'm not really sure. I hope it's just rain and not just a positive COVID test.
Yeah, because I'll tell you what, that would absolutely derail the entire playoffs if a team is to catch COVID. Obviously, like I said, the NL side, there's still a bunch of games to go on. I actually feel like there's going to be more game threes on the NL side than there was on the AL side, in which there was only one. So that's going to be exciting to watch. But let's talk about the final topic in terms of the MLB. And that's our expectations for the rest of these playoffs. I think the AL side already set the precedent of the style of baseball we're going to see. And I guess we'll start on that AL side first, Rahill, since most of that side's already decided. Who do we expect going to the ALCS and perhaps the World Series to this point?
The ALC, I think if the White Sox can squeak it out, I think maybe they beat the Astros. I think either team can beat the Astros. I think either team can beat the Astros for that regard. I'm very scared as a Yankees fan to be playing the Rays. I think the Rays just have something on the Yankees, and I guess there's signs to look forward to because it's not at the Trop for one reason, but their pitching is completely like shackled and cuffed the Yankees batters. Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton, DJ Glaber, they have been able to get nothing off Blake Snell, Tyler Glasnow, and keep in mind that Rays team was never fully healthy when those two met. They never had their full bullpen ready, and the Yankees still couldn't buy a run. So I don't know. It's a blessing that they don't have to go to the Trop, so that gives them more of a chance. But I think the Rays probably win that 1-5. in my opinion.
Wow, really? You think the Rays are going to beat the Yankees?
Yeah, because I just don't believe that. Besides Garrett Cole, I don't believe any other Yankee starter is going to get a win.
Well, it's a valid point. And by the way, we do have Eddie in here as of the moment. For the moment, as Mike's muted, we actually just lost Zoe, Eddie. It seems like her computer went on the fritz right as her lights started freaking out as we were talking about the Miami Marlins. We're talking about our baseball predictions on the AL side first for the rest of the playoffs. What have you seen to this point in the playoffs, first off, and what are your expectations throughout the rest of this playoff period?
Absolutely. Well, first off, just heartache for Minnesota Twins fans. I mean, seriously, 18 consecutive playoff losses. That is painful for them. Really impressed with the Marlins taking that win over the Cubs. Of course, today's game postponed to tomorrow, but you know what? Like, the Marlins did a great job starting off against the Cubs. The Yankees, I'm not a Yankee fan, but kudos to you guys. I mean, took down Shane Bieber, arguably the best pitcher in baseball this season, and then coming back multiple times, including that tough 4-1 deficit after everything that happened at the beginning of the game with the rain delay, and able to get through. I've got a lot of faith in the Yankees right now. I do also have a lot of faith in the Dodgers still. I like whoever wins the Yankees-Rays series, I think is going to be the team that's in the World Series. I don't have a lot of faith in Houston going much further because Minnesota's just bad in the playoffs. And on the other side, like, I just, for the National League, everybody says it's the Dodger Invitational, but one team I would not count out are the St. Louis Cardinals. They went all the way to the NLCS last year. They took down a really good Braves team. The Padres are beaten up right now. No Lamet, no Clevenger, who was their big acquisition. They gave up so much for him to pitch in the playoffs, and he's not there. And Chris Paddock had nothing yesterday. I have some faith in the Cardinals that maybe they could be a team that challenged the Dodgers. And remember something else. The Miami Marlins have never lost a playoff series before. They've been in the playoffs twice. They've won the World Series both times, and it is 2020, so you just don't know what to expect with them.
Well, I'd love to see a Yankees-Marlins World Series, especially after everything, going on. But at the same time, for the Yankees aspect, and Rahill mentioned it, he feels that they're going to lose simply because of the fact of pitching. But I think the big thing is the bats. If the bats come against Tampa, it is going to be a big opportunity. But Eddie, one more thing that we also mentioned a little while back was that right now, in fact, the White Sox and the Athletics are playing. In fact, the Athletics lead 4-3 in the top half of the fifth inning. If the Astros get to play the Athletics, we know the A's are as well in the playoffs. Could you see them going to the ALCS if they have to play the A's next round?
I could see the Astros going to the ALCS either way. I did not have much faith in the White Sox going into the playoffs to begin with. I think they're in the same boat as San Diego and the Blue Jays. Those are teams that are going to be really good down the line. But right now, first year in the playoffs in a weird year, I don't have faith in them. And Oakland, I don't have any faith in the playoffs. And, I know Oakland recently has owned Houston in the regular season, but I think the Astros could easily make it to the ALCS. I just don't see them beating the Yankees or Tampa Bay, regardless of who wins that series.
Indeed, and it's going to be interesting. Right now, still my pick, Yankees to win the World Series. But again, as you mentioned, weird year, probably going to be a weird champion. We're just bound for it. It's 2020, folks. But I do want to move on to our last topic before, Eddie, you and I talk a little bit of NASCAR. But how about the NBA Finals? We saw Game 1, a blowout for the Lakers against Miami. Miami plagued right now with injuries. What are our expectations? I'll start with you, Rahill, for this series.
Well, Bam Adebayo and Dragic are doubtful for Game 2, so I don't think they're going to play. So I expect them to go down 2-0. But everyone I think we all need to relax. We're not going to see the Lakers shoot that well from three-point range probably again in this series. They shot 60% from three-point range. That just doesn't happen, especially for this Lakers team who could be very sporadic, very sporadic with the three-point shooting. One day they can do that. Next day they go out and they go 5 for 35. We saw that against the Blazers in the first round. Now, Rondo's been a huge help for them off the bench. But no question. I think after Game 1, no one's questioning that the Lakers are going to lose this series. I think they're going to win. But I still would give Miami probably a game, maybe two, if they're maybe two at most. But I'd still see the Lakers. I still see LeBron being leading the Lakers, and I think Anthony Davis at this rate, if he plays like that, will probably win Finals MVP.
How about you, Eddie?
I mean, if Bam Adebayo's out, who's stopping Anthony Davis? That's the big thing here, because you know how good LeBron's going to be, and none of the Final Four teams in the NBA in the bubble had any chance at neutralizing LeBron. The only good team who did was the Clippers with Kawhi, and they're gone. And now Miami, I mean, Crowder's not holding back LeBron James on defense. Jimmy Butler is not. The only thing where they'd have a defensive advantage potentially was Bam Adebayo against Anthony Davis, or at least, to be able to control Davis a bit. And you saw once Adebayo strained his shoulder last night, Davis went off, and he finished with 34 points, 14 rebounds. And, like Rahill mentioned, sometimes the Lakers do catch fire from long range. Sometimes the Heat do as well. But if Miami is going to be without two of their three top scorers, especially in a year where so many people want to see the Lakers win after everything with Kobe Bryant, I think the Heat are in a really tough spot right now. Even though it's only been one game, it feels like they're much further behind than just 1-0.
If I'm not mistaken, wasn't Crowder on the Cavaliers the final year of LeBron's contract as well? Yeah, so he knows a thing or two how to play him, and that's another thing that's made it very effective. And to me, again, I think the Lakers, they dominate the series. Obviously, and I agree with you, Rahill, I think the Heat do take one away. But just like how it's been the entire playoffs for this Lakers team, they're dominant. And I guess really the only last question I have in this regard is, who wins Finals MVP? LeBron James or Anthony Davis? Because LeBron was, I believe, a assist shy of a triple-double, and AD had 34 points, 9 rebounds, 7 assists to open up game one. You have to assume they're going to keep up these stats totals. Who would you think would get it?
If the stat totals stay the same, it's Anthony Davis. Usually the Finals MVP goes to just a player who just scores the most. I mean, I know LeBron's probably going to do his thing. He's probably going to get a lot more triple doubles in this series, but if Anthony Davis keeps up these numbers, he'll probably win Finals MVP. You talk about if Bam is not playing, he's going to be grabbing rebounds at will. He's probably going to be grabbing what? He's probably going to be scoring 30 a game, probably averaging somewhere around 13, 14 rebounds. That has to be Finals MVP in my opinion.
How about you, Eddie?
Gotta agree with Rahill. I think it really depends, though, if Bam plays, because I think Anthony Davis would go down a little bit. I think Bam could hold him down just enough to give LeBron James the edge in terms of MVP. But if Bam is trying to play hurt or is not in there at all, Anthony Davis all the way for MVP.
Well, to me, it's a little bit of a tough decision because I feel if LeBron James finds a way to average a triple-double throughout the entirety of the finals, in which it's going to be very hard to do. But if he finds a way to do that, it's going to be very hard to not give him Finals MVP, in my opinion. But as history has mentioned, Rahill mentioned it, Eddie mentioned it, scoring tends to be the big favor in terms of the Finals MVP winner. And if that's the case, then, yeah, it'll probably go to AD. But I still have a feeling it's an NBA Finals, LeBron winning. LeBron's got to get it some way. So I'm going to go with LeBron as my pick. But, again, there's still 3 more games that the Lakers have to win. They have 6 more games potentially in the series if the Lakers don't win it 4-0. That's going to be exciting to watch. And obviously that's going to be the second champion we have crowned since COVID really has gone through its process and sports have come back. But speaking of champions, we'll move on to our final topic, and this is where Eddie and I will have a discussion. I don't really know, Rahill, if you'll have much to say about NASCAR.
Yeah, I think I'm going to drop out here. Again, thanks for having me on the show. I always love coming on here. So, yeah, hopefully I'll see you guys again.
Indeed, and we thank you so much as well as Zoe for coming on, and we hope her power figures itself out because that was pretty funny right when that happened.
Yeah, let's hope.
But Eddie, NASCAR now going through the first round, working towards the second round, and it is Talladega week. We saw an excellent race there the first time, Daytona had very good racing all around as well, and yet we're here again. What can we expect here this weekend?
I don't know if I can say what to expect because clearly the unexpected happened at both Talladega and Daytona. Think about guys like Tyler Reddick running up front. Of course, we still got the big one. We'll see one. We'll see some playoff drivers taken out in it. That's inevitable. But I don't know who to favor this weekend because you're going to see drivers like Austin Dillon, for example, who are going to be super aggressive. Maybe even Chase Elliott. Austin Dillon, if you remember now, he was doing so well in the round of 16, but lots of problems at Vegas. He's on the outside looking in. And Chase Elliott, despite winning a stage at Las Vegas, got stuck behind Ryan Newman on the last restart, and he's only 10 points to the good. So I'd see him be aggressive as a great plate racer. And even though he's not in the playoffs, I got to say Matt DiBenedetto is going to be going for it because there's been a lot more rumors in this already wild week in NASCAR news about some uncertainty whether or not he'll be back at Wood Brothers. We know Austin Cindric is down there primed and ready to go in the Xfinity Series. So he's going to be motivated to get to victory lane. And I talked about this back at Daytona. It holds true again at Talladega. Two of the most consistently good finishing cars at plate tracks since beginning of last season, other than like Denny Hamlin and the Penske guys, are Ryan Newman and Chris Buescher, who are now teammates. Remember Daytona? Of course, they were up front. Talladega again. Buescher had a really good run, back-to-back top tens. He had a nice finish at Las Vegas. I think both of them could be in the mix. Ryan Newman is in the mix in the fall Talladega race every year and seems to get passed by a Penske guy in the final turn every year. It's been Keselowski twice and Blaney once just in the last 5 years in that race. So we shall see, but I think there's a lot of uncertainty. And one other person, I know I just keep naming people, but don't forget Kyle Busch either. He still hasn't won yet. He's getting frustrated, and he's not really known as a great plate racer, but he has run well at Talladega before, and he's going to be going for it.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Kyle Busch is going to be one to look forward to in terms of this race because I think this is going to be the most aggressive Kyle Busch we're going to see. But my prediction to win is actually going to be Joey Logano. You mentioned obviously Blaney and Keselowski's success. I really think Logano is due since his most recent Talladega win. You remember that controversial finish over Dale Earnhardt Jr. And you know, you think about that chase race in particular, I'm not saying that this race is going to have the same impact. Obviously, you're going to have unlimited green, white, checkered attempts, but the finish will come down to the wire, and I feel like he's going to be the guy that gets it done. You know, for Penske, again, you know, you missed an opportunity with Ryan Blaney in that first round. Here in the second round, you know, you're trying to pursue a championship. Keselowski, Logano, they've looked good. And the Fords, to be honest, when it comes to plate racing, really are the best as a manufacturer working as a team together. So I really think that he has a really good shot. And as you mentioned as well, Kyle Busch, and I wouldn't count on Denny Hamlin either. We know Denny is at plate tracks. I think he's going to be pretty solid here at Talladega. But continuing on the NASCAR aspect, what are we thinking about now going through the rest of this round? Obviously, you know, you already mentioned Austin Dillon's struggles, but how much of a factor does Talladega have an impact on how this round shapes out?
Well, really Las Vegas was the place that everybody was banking on getting as many points as possible because it's Talladega and then the Charlotte Roval back-to-back. You know the Charlotte Roval, I mean, let's be honest, probably either Chase Elliott or Martin Truex Jr. will win because they are the two best road course racers by far. But unless something crazy happens and Jimmy Johnson wrecks the leader spinning out in the final turn. But that was also the first year at the track. So I think there are going to be certain guys like an Austin Dillon who are actually, you know, he's not a good road course racer. He's got more faith in the Talladega race than the Charlotte Roval. Let's also not forget, Austin Dillon missed the Daytona road course race because of COVID, and Kaz Grala had to fill in for him. So this is going to be his first chance running a road course since the Roval last year. So it's been a long time since he's had to deal with the left and right turns, and the Charlotte Roval is not an easy road course by any standards. So for him, it's different. For other guys like the Fords, like Denny Hamlin, they can afford, you know, if something happens at Talladega to still have a chance at the Roval. But I still think there's surprises to come. Kurt Busch winning, nobody thought that Kurt Busch was going to make the round of 8, just with the amount of uncertainty with Ganassi Racing. And, he's been more of a non-factor this year than he typically even is. And, he gets the win at the home track. He's into the round of 8. And, people like an Alex Bowman, maybe, he's in a tough spot right now. Almirola, despite being such a good plate racer, that these guys are really going to have to weigh their options between Talladega and the Roval. Where are they more willing to take risks, and where do they have more faith in when they make their moves? But, Tim, I just want to bring it up now. We're talking about the racing this week, but NASCAR, they're looking ahead towards next year. And I got to tell you, Bristol Dirt I'm not a fan of. Other than that, I like almost every change in the NASCAR schedule.
Yeah, you must be reading my mind, because that's what I was going to bring up next. And I'll tell you what, I'm real excited. I'll say this, these last few road course races, I've slowly become a fan of the style a lot more in terms of how the racing and the paces go. And this year, it was a big success to turn around and, bring in a lot more tracks, including Road America, for example. I think that is huge to get these tracks that the fans despised out of the schedule and bringing in new, fresh tracks. And this is really similar, to be honest, what F1 did, except F1 created new circuits rather than creating or going to new tracks. Essentially, NASCAR is going to a new track that's been around, maybe in its other series, but overall has tried to get them more involved and really wants to bring a refresher to the Cup Series. Because let's be honest, Kentucky isn't a fun race. We already talked about this. Iowa, I'm glad that is off the schedule overall for NASCAR, because that track hasn't been entertaining. Do I wish Texas would disappear from NASCAR as a whole? Absolutely. Is it going to? Probably not. But you add multiple road courses and you add multiple tracks that, especially Nashville, that these drivers want to go to and see. There's going to be a lot of viewers in NASCAR. I'm gonna go and say this. I think NASCAR's viewership next season, Eddie, is the highest it's been in about 6-7 years, because there is a lot to look forward to. And the fact that I know the new generation isn't coming next season, but this all setting up for the new generation of cars is going to make it even more exciting to look forward to.
Yeah, and, you mentioned Nashville. I also like that they announced that Darlington and Nashville will both be run with a different downforce package. It's something people want to see, more side-by-side racing, and that's what's going to provide it. And I'm a guy who likes road courses, and seeing some different ones in the schedule is nice. And the Bristol Dirt race, it'll probably grow on me. I kind of don't like that Bristol loses a normal date, because it's one of the best tracks in NASCAR, but I always wanted to see a dirt race in the Cup Series, and the novelty of the trucks at Eldora has kind of worn off. So, you can put a Cup race at a dirt track. The main thing that I just want to conclude with is my favorite part about this NASCAR schedule. I'm going to make a YouTube video on my channel about this, is how NASCAR is recognizing how other motorsports have their own tracks that they care very much about, and NASCAR doesn't want to interfere with them. The thing that I'm most excited about is that the Brickyard 400 is moving to the Indy Road Course. I just felt it was always unnatural to see NASCARs going around the Indianapolis Oval. And I just think that should be the Indy 500 thing. Similarly, the Daytona Road Course was nice this year when Cuomo wouldn't let them race at Watkins Glen, but I didn't really want that to continue, because that's a tradition more with IMSA. And, NASCAR has other road courses that are in their heritage that they can go to that fit more with the NASCAR style. And that's kind of what I like about the decision to get rid of the Daytona Road Course and to move Indy off of the oval. So that's something else that I like. I just think it's really good that O'Donnell and Phelps and everybody else up there in NASCAR are really listening to the fans now. And I think it's going to pay off and cause for some huge success next year, leading up to the arrival of the next gen in 2022.
Yeah, it is going to be exciting, because there's just so much in terms of the scheduling that they've actually listened to fans on. And it felt for a very good while that they weren't listening to fans. But Indianapolis, you mentioned, I mean, I couldn't stand to watch an Indianapolis race. That was another track, too, that I mentioned or failed to mention alongside Kentucky, that, all these cut down tires, it's a caution fest. The fact that you can turn around and make it a more unique race in the road course, that's huge. And we obviously saw how good the Xfinity race there was. But in terms of Daytona, and I guess I asked you this question, isn't the Daytona road course still on the shootout schedule, however?
Yes. Now, here's the thing. That is also a non-points race. I don't like having a points race there because you know what? The biggest points race there should be the 24 hours of Daytona for WeatherTech IMSA in January. You know what? The thing with the Clash is different, and I am kind of excited for them to have the road course for that because the Clash has become just such a mess the last couple years with everybody crashing. Eric Jones' car barely surviving coming across the line. Like, I'd rather them do something else with the road course than just having a crash fest.
Is this fair to say that this is probably the end of the era of all the 1.5-mile tracks in NASCAR as we know it? Because I really think Charlotte will be the only one left when it's all said and done if NASCAR continues this trend over the next 5 years.
I don't think it's going to be to that extent. I think there's still going to be others other than Charlotte that survive. I think Atlanta is still very profitable for them. I don't think Las Vegas is also an interesting situation because they could always reconfigure that track. We're hearing about Auto Club. They also have that bull ring there. If they'd ever make use of that for NASCAR, they wouldn't want to get out of that city. I think Charlotte and Atlanta are just historically with NASCAR long enough that they will remain in their cookie cutter form. The only other one that I think could stay is Kansas, only because that has probably been the most exciting 1.5 miles as of late. The one thing, though, there is safety is a concern, unlike any other 1.5 miles when you think about the number of hard wrecks there's been in the last few years. But I think overall we're finally seeing the abandonment of the 2-decade-long, reign of 1.5 miles in the sport.
Indeed, and again, 2021 can't come quicker. I really can't wait to see. But obviously, first, we have to declare a champion, which is the most important part on the NASCAR Cup Series side. But I do want to move on to our final topic, and I also have some breaking news to announce, actually. Before we mention that, Doc Rivers, he just signed with the 76ers to become their head coach.
Oh, my
Isn't that
goodness.
insane?
We're breaking news here. If there's anybody out there that I think could try to control the Simmons-Embiid situation, I think Doc Rivers is the guy because Mike D'Antoni, I don't think he's much of a presence. He's a good coach. I don't see him as much of a presence. And Ty Lue, let's be honest, when he was the Cavs coach, he just sat there and LeBron was the coach. So you know what? If there was anybody who was going to try to de-escalate the situation and bring in some control to Philadelphia, I think Doc Rivers is a solid hire.
Indeed, it's going to be very, very exciting to see what Doc Rivers brings in a new atmosphere. We have to remember, he's already played in that division as it is, coaching the Celtics for a little while before moving his way, obviously, to the Clippers. So I think when you're looking for Philadelphia, he's almost essentially right back at home. And he has a solid team. Now it's about making them competitive to win a championship, and I think he is the right guy for that job. And yet again, for him in the NBA season, I know he blew a big playoff series, but it's rebounding, refining what he's best at, and being successful, and that's one thing Doc Rivers is. But now let's talk about our NFL picks to wrap up the show. Do you want to start with your predictions of your 3 games?
Yeah, I'll start. So first of all, you got your first 2 losses last week. I've now jumped over you. I'm at 8-1, which I'm pretty excited about. So my 3 picks this week. First one I think is the easiest. The Rams at home against the Giants. I don't have much faith in Daniel Jones, and without Saquon and without Sterling Shepard, that offense is really a mess. So I think the Rams, who have actually been surprisingly good to start the season, get the win over the Giants. Second one, I've got Seattle, who have been red hot with Russell Wilson, taking down Miami. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. The Seahawks did so good against a Cowboys defense, which is really good. Now against a Miami defense, which is not that good. I think they're going to be able to pile it on. And then my one that was kind of on the fence about, I have the Bills getting to 4-0 at Las Vegas. I know the Raiders started out 2-0, but they looked really flat against New England on Sunday. And I think Josh Allen is on quite the run. Think about how, the Jets and the Browns both passed over Josh Allen because he was in Wyoming and people thought he was a no-name. And he's come out and he's a heck of a lot better than Baker and a heck of a lot better than Sam Darnold. And this year on the ground through the air, he's got Stephon Diggs as a great target on that team. I like Buffalo over the Raiders.
Yeah, I like Buffalo too as well over the Raiders. I think that's going to be arguably the game of the week. But now I'm going to go with my picks in regards to one game that I think is going to be really one-sided, and that's the Baltimore Ravens taking on the Washington football team. And man, that was very hard to not say the other name of it. But overall, the Ravens, coming off a tough game, they have to rebound now and really try to answer, yes, okay, you lost to the Chiefs, big whoop, but you need to show that offense. Lamar Jackson, he's a superstar. That team can play with the best of them. I'm eager to see if Washington's defense can keep up because they've played pretty solid the first couple weeks. There's no line about that. They are 1-2, but they played pretty well. So I'm eager to see if they can keep up. What can Landon Collins do as a safety against a bunch of fast receivers? I really think this is a big opportunity, though, for Baltimore, and I think it is a one-sided game in which the Ravens ultimately end up blowing it out. I'm going to kind of go a little bit out of order because my next one's going to go to the Monday Night Football game in which I have the Green Bay Packers dominating the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, the Falcons, they've blown 2 leads to this point. The defense hasn't gotten better in 4 years, and I know they've gone through injuries, but it continues to be a disaster. Matt Ryan is an excellent quarterback, but who knows what's going on with Julio Jones, and Aaron Rodgers is a possessed man. Since he's broken up with Danica Patrick, and yes, this tends to be in history, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is a perfect example, but Aaron Rodgers has been arguably the second best quarterback in the league right now, only behind Russell Wilson to open up this year in terms of his performance. I mean, it seems like he's made every single pass. He didn't even need Devontae Adams last week. He had Lazard come out and make some big plays. I'm excited to see this Packers team, arguably the best team in the North and arguably the team to watch. But I think they get the division lead as well this week. I think the Bears lose to the Colts, but that's not a prediction. I just think that's going to happen. My third and final prediction, I'm going to go Browns versus Cowboys. And, it's hard because I want the Browns to win as a Giants fan. Do I want to pick the Cowboys? It's like it's a 50-50 shot, but I'm going to go with the Cleveland Browns. I think Odell is due for a big game. They're 2-1 to start. I would love to see the Browns get a 3-1 start as well to the year. I think they're a really effective team, a lot better than last season. They're starting to put it together, but they need to be consistent. I'm not saying them beating Dallas means they're going to make the Super Bowl, but what it just simply means is that they found a little bit more success. So I have the Browns, I'm going to say by a touchdown, 7 points over the Cowboys, in which the NFC East continues to be an embarrassment for yet another week.
Well, who knows? But yeah, I'll tell you one thing. If the Browns beat the Cowboys and Dallas drops to 1-3 losing to Cleveland, all those people who were like, Mike McCarthy's going to bring us a Super Bowl are going to be sorely mistaken.
Well, yeah, it's going to be sorely mistaken, but I'll also say this on the NFC East side. They fall apart. They fall to 1-3. So what? They're still battling for a division lead because Washington, remember my prediction has them losing as well to the Ravens. And then, well, the question is, what do the Eagles do against the 49ers? Do we know if Jimmy G's going to be back? I don't know. But at the same time, that 49ers team is soon to get Deebo Samuel back. He's not coming back this week, but he's gonna start coming back very soon. And, they may lose yet another football game because their offensive line has been inconsistent and they're playing a pretty solid defense. And I'm not even going to talk about the New York Giants because if we don't lose by 30 this week, then it's not Giants football. So I think that the NFC East continues to suffer, but the Cowboys shouldn't really worry. Hey, you could be 6-10, 7-9, and you may still win a division. So I'm eager to see what they do, but NFC East continues to be an embarrassment week after week after week. But that's going to wrap it up for our October 2nd edition of Sports Speak. Again, as I mentioned earlier, it is October 1st. I'm not Eddie Kalegi. I'm Tim Moore.
All right. I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And as well, big thanks to Rahill Jaiswal and Zoe Alter for coming on this special episode today. And we shall see you next Friday, and I'm sure with more MLB playoff reactions in particular. Obviously, the NBA Finals should be done by then. So we'll have a whole bunch of reactions as well as NASCAR and a full review of Talladega and what should we expect for the Roval and much more next Friday. But with that being said, you've been watching Sports Speak, and we will see you next week.